to this week's episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Grab a seat at the table as Masters rowing coaches Marlene Royal and Rebecca Caro share their biggest secrets on how to unleash your hidden potential and plot a new course for real results on the water and off. Now, on to the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of our Square Blades Challenge. I'm Rebecca Caro, and I'm here with Marlene Royal.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello to our Faster Masters Square Blade experts.
Yeah, you're shortly going to be experts. Some of you may not be experts quite yet. So last week, we did a recap. We're just going to recap what we did, which was that you had to be able to do the stationary stability drill in order to understand how to control the weight in the hands so that you can manage the blade height off the water. And our second drill was to get you starting to row with a 1/4 feather. So really subtle, just to get going. And we had some recommendations about how to build this into your rowing training and ways to do it in crew boats and individually. Now, today, we're moving on to progressive exercises, which you can try next. I will say that these are not exclusive, that you have to do them in the order that we suggest, but learning is like a ladder. You will step up, and at some point, you'll get to a point where this is too hard, or I can't quite do this. So remember last week's lessons and step back down and do them again before you build up to the ones we're going to introduce you to today. And that process of stepping up and stepping back is ongoing. You can always do more of the basics. Introduce our first exercise, Marlene.
So rowing circles. Now, keep in mind, when we're talking about drills, and this is a nice phrase I learned from Rebecca, but when we're talking about drills, either you're going to have a drill that isolates an element, or you're going to have a drill that exaggerates an element. In this particular case, rowing circles, we're going to isolate an element in that when you're rowing circles, you're going to be rowing with one oar. And you can stabilize the boat with your non-rowing, or if you're in a sculling boat, you can do that by holding your hand out straight and just balancing the boat with the non-rowing oar, or you can hold the oar next to your body. It's up to you. But rowing circles, and now since our goal is square blade rowing, we'd like you to do this with square blades. You don't have to do it with square blades sometimes when you work on other points. But rowing in circles, one reason I really like this drill is because if you do not have a coach with you and you are in a single or sculling boat and you're self-coaching, you have the ability to watch your blade. And when you're rowing circles, you're almost always going to have perfect release timing. So rowing circles, do this square blade. Okay, you've already now have a sense of how far you have to tap down to clear the bottom edge of the blade from the water. Now start to practice that tap down. And at first, you might want to do this as a progression. You might do it arms only. You might do it arms and body. But you can, in fact, then start to add in part slides and move to full slides. So you can row in circles, going through a progression, just like you would if you were doing a pick drill. And this allows you to watch the blade. It allows you to make sure that you're entering correctly and that you're exiting and tapping down and starting to feel what weight in the hands do you need in order to maintain that shaft at the correct height off the water.
Of course, one critical bit of information we failed to mention is rowing in circles you do with one oar at a time. So if you're in a single scull, you'll first do your bow side and then your stroke side, or the other way around. If you're in a crew boat, you can all do it. The oar that's not rowing is resting on the water and is maintaining the boat balance at a correct, perfect balance. And so you have to first identify that. It's often challenging when you first start because the oar that's not rowing, you're not paying attention to it, and you let that handle rise and lower, you'll find your balance tips, which is not going to help you with the other oar, which is supposed to be practicing square blades.
The nice thing with
Now,
rowing in circles is you can watch your blade, and you can really make sure that your blade is square and that you're placing it into the water correctly, because you can see whether that's a direct entry or whether you're missing water. So this is a very nice way to work on that.
one of the other things that you can practice while you're rowing in circles is not to look at your blade, but to look at your handle. When you look at your handle, the key thing that you need to watch is how low is it over your legs, knees, and shins as you're coming up the slide. And it might help you to have a visual reference so that you know when you've got your handle too high, obviously the oar tip will touch the water. And so for a visual reference, what you can do is look at yourself holding your handle and then look past it and see something that you can latch onto, which might be a stripe on the deck of your boat, or it might be somewhere up the back of the person sitting in front of you, so that you know if your hand is not in line with that point, your handle is not at the correct height, and that obviously isn't going to help you with your square blade rowing in circles.
And make sure you do it on both sides.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's challenging, and you may find one side is easier than the other. We've got a training group on Facebook called the Faster Masters Training Group, and this is where you can go to discuss this with other people who are following Faster Masters in their training and their rowing self-education. The search name is Faster Masters Training Group, and here on the screen is the link to the Facebook group, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. Our second drill is the delayed feather or late feather. Marlene, can you teach people how to do this?
Sure. With our delayed feather drill, now let's consider this an exaggeration drill. In the delayed feather drill, you're going to make your release with the blade square. And then once your hands change direction to move away from your body, you're going to feather off. So it is a bit of an exaggerated motion, which isn't, when you're actually in motion rowing, it's a little bit more of a smoother transition. But we do want you to carry over what you've just learned in the rowing in circles drill, which is the tap down, paying attention to your blade, paying attention to your handle. How much height did you need to get off the water to clear that bottom edge of the blade? And now you're going to start to put that into continuous rowing. Now you can also use this drill in a progression. You can do this arms and body, quarter slide, half slide. You're moving, the idea is that you're going to be moving through the release and the feather off more times if you're doing it in a shorter slide sequence. You can also, if you've never done this before, you may want to do your rowing in circles and then progress to a delayed feather while you're doing your circles, so that you can observe your blade and make sure it's doing what you want it to do, and then move to doing it with both sides, whether you're sculling or you're rowing in a sweep boat, both sides of the boat, working on the delayed feather. I like to visualize, pretend that you have a soccer ball on the water right behind your blade. So something a little bit bigger than a racing buoy. And you want to come up and over the buoy, up and over the buoy. You don't want to whack the buoy, but think about coming up and feathering as the blade is moving towards the bow, right? It wants to go back where it came from.
So this particular drill fits really nicely with the episode 1 drills. So the first one, which was the stationary stability drill, you might want to go back and do that again, practicing thinking about lifting your blade over the soccer ball. And secondly, this can also fit quite nicely with the quarter feather, which we also practiced in episode 1. And you might want to do that alternating strokes. So you can really switch it up and make it challenging and more interesting for yourself. One thing I do recommend with all of these drills is you do them for 10 strokes and then go back to normal sculling. So you kind of give yourself a mental break. You can relax, get rid of the tension, because tension is the number one thing that's probably going to kill your ability to do square blade rowing when you're not familiar with it. You'll be gripping too tight. You'll be bracing yourself. You might be tied around the shoulders as well. So go back into normal sculling, relax, 10 strokes, nice rowing, and then come back to the drill. And what you want to see is when you've done the drill 3 times, how improved am I? And I've said this before, but I like to give myself a score out of 10. So 10 is amazing and 1 is 0 is terrible, maybe 1. But, you know, did I move from a 3 to a 4? You know, did I have a couple of strokes that were up at a 6 or a 7? You know, and then of course your challenge is to string together slightly better strokes and drop the ones that were less good.
And I think if you're in a sculling boat or in a single, it's important to notice, do you have trouble on one side more than the other? Does your boat tend to tip a little bit more to one side versus the other? Or do you have more dexterity and you come out cleaner on one side? So these are things to pay attention to. And if you're noticing that you tend to drop to port more than you drop to starboard, as Rebecca said, go back to the stationary stability drill, do a little bit more of that in your warm-up, do some continuing rowing, and then blend in the delayed feather drill again. But I think it's always important to get those continuous strokes in so that you have a chance to integrate what you've just practiced, and you keep a little bit of boat speed. It's a lot easier when your boat is moving a bit more too, in case you're finding that you're slowing down too much.
Yeah. I will say that it's really good in your normal sculling to feather over the soccer ball rather than slide the oar out of the water and onto the feather. That is my preferred way of sculling. And it means that, you know, if the water surface is a little choppy, you won't have any problems with it because your oar will be high above the tips of the waves.
Yeah, and if you're on a race course that has buoys and you're racing in lanes, I mean, we all know that it's possible for us to go off course. And, you know, this can be a very key skill to have if the water's a little bumpy. If you're going off course into the buoying line, you know, you want to go up and over those buoys. You don't want to hit those buoys and really disrupt your balance and your concentration.
I just want to roll back now just to a little bit about what Marlene was saying about if your boat goes down more to one side than the other. A good stationary drill to check what is causing that is called the checking and testing and proving that the blades balance the boat when they're out of the water. And this slightly long named exercise is a good one to practice. You sit with the blades flat on the water, feathered, and it's a 1, 2, 3 exercise. When you say 1, you push down with your right hand. When you say 2, you push down with your left hand. And when you say 3, you bring the boat back to balance. So you can do this as a crew or individually. And what you want to observe is when you press down with your right hand, does the boat tip to port or starboard, to stroke side or bow side? Then when you say 2 and you press down with your left hand, what happens? And what you need to work out is if your boat is generally tipping more to one side than the other, which of your hands is likely at the wrong place? It might be both of them, but what do you need to do to bring the boat back to balance? Because it is, unless there's a really, really strong side wind, you can be sure that any balance problems are you, not the environment. It's best to assume that first. I have done something that's made my boat tip down. What did I do? And that goes back to the very introduction of our square blades challenge in lesson 1 that Marlene mentioned, that the whole point about square blades is learning how to time your release. And that is going to give you a clue as to why the boat isn't staying level when you take the blades out of the water.
And if you're getting stuck, try to do it a little earlier.
Yeah, you can tap out a little further in front of your body. I mean, just treat it as
Yeah.
an experiment for now.
Exactly.
It
It should
won't
be easy, right? It should be easy, right?
The blades should
When
easily come out of the water. You shouldn't have to force them out.
correct.
That's what you mean by easy.
Yes.
Easy doesn't necessarily mean it's straightforward. I love the
Right,
English
right,
language.
right. But you shouldn't feel like you're struggling with your oar all the time. You should feel like, if your timing is right, it's going to help you.
And that's again when Marlene said about doing the 10 strokes normal rowing, get a little bit more speed on the boat, and then you feel that release becoming a little less constrained when there's a bit more speed on the boat. Now that's our wrap up for the Square Blades Challenge number 2. Join us again next week where we do the third and final most challenging exercises. And as before, please come into the Faster Masters training group on Facebook to join the other students who are also working their way through the Square Blades Challenge. Till next time.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your rowing friends about the show. And if you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.